Pierwsze wystąpienie pana Johna Hennessy'ego, dyrektora operacyjnego firmy Scrum. Z uwagi na różnice czasowe poprosiliśmy o przygotowanie specjalnego filmu dotyczącego transdermalnego monitorowania alkoholu i systemu TMSA w Stanach Zjednoczonych. Pan John Hennessy jest dyrektorem operacyjnym firmy Scrum, czyli firmy, która produkuje i dystrybuuje bransoletki TMSA. Promuje wdrażanie technologii na rynkach międzynarodowych, posiada 25-letnie doświadczenie zawodowe w pracy dla potrzeb wymiaru sprawiedliwości, w tym 11-letnie doświadczenie na stanowisku kierowniczym. Działa na rzecz organizacji bezpieczeństwa ruchu drogowego, gdzie głównym celem jest ratowanie życia ludzkiego, edukacja, a przede wszystkim promowanie innowacji i badań. Prosimy jeszcze również o zajęcie miejsc w prezydium pana pułkownika Krzysztofa Stefanowskiego, zastępcę dyrektora generalnego Służby Więziennej, panią kierownik projektu profesor Beatę Marię Nowak, pana Amita Setiego, dyrektora operacyjnego firmy Scrum. Proszę o zajęcie miejsc. I proszę o odtworzenie. I jeszcze poprosimy również pana Joe'a Westona tutaj do prezydium. Na prośbę pani profesor. I proszę o odtworzenie przygotowanego wystąpienia pana Johna Hennessy'ego.
Hi, my name is John Hennessy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Scram Systems. I've been in the electronic monitoring industry for over 21 years and employed in Scram Systems for the past 14 years. I'm going to give a quick overview of the electronic monitoring industry in the United States by product segment and how each product is being used in the United States. I'll also give an estimate of how many clients are currently being monitored by each technology in the United States. And if you look at the electronic monitoring industry, you can break it down, the U.S. market, into 5 segments. The first segment is the newest segment in the United States, is the mobile app or non-fitted device segment. The second, which is the oldest technology in the United States, is the radio frequency or what we'd like to call house arrest segment in the United States. The third is breath alcohol, which is breathalyzers. The fourth is the fastest and largest segment of electronic monitoring, which is GPS. And the last but not least segment is continuous alcohol monitoring. And I'll talk a little bit about each and every one of these segment markets and how they're being used in the United States. The first one is the mobile app, which is the newest segment in the United States. There's roughly 200,000 non-fitted devices being used in the United States. This is used as client check-in, is when it first came out. So instead of using a bracelet on somebody, you would hand them a cellular phone and they have a mobile check-in. They can answer questions, check in, get a GPS point. These mobile apps also allow for an officer to share documents with a client, send appointment reminders, and what was really big during COVID was video conferencing. And so these allow an officer to actually do video conferencing, an interview with one of their clients while using a mobile app. And it stores all this information and it stores the video conferencing if needed for a court date further down the road, which became very popular in COVID. So you can interview people remotely. And then the hardware companies in the electronic monitoring industry, the ones that are providing the RF and the GPS, they've also come out with mobile apps, and the mobile apps are used in conjunction with their technology, and it can notify a client or an officer of an alert. What mobile apps have really done in the U.S. market is made officers and clients. It's made officers' jobs a lot more efficient, and it's made clients ability to communicate with their officer and to transmit data to their officer much easier than coming into an office and doing so. The second market segment I'll talk about is the radio frequency, which is the first market segment that came into the United States in the late 80s. There's roughly 100,000 people on electronic monitoring home confinement in the United States. This is for low-risk clients. It's also very good for juvenile population. This market used to be, when I first got in this market, this was it. This is what officers used to supervise people that were nonviolent offenders. Unfortunately, the GPS has cannibalized this market, and I'll get into a little bit reason why when I talk a little bit about the GPS market. But back when GPS first came out into the marketplace, 17, 18 years ago in the United States, there was a huge price disparity between radio frequency and GPS. A lot of agencies couldn't afford GPS, and the amount of data they were getting at that time from GPS was they weren't used to. So, radio frequency was between $3 and $4 American dollars a day. GPS, when it first came out, was between $14 and $15 per client per day. And not only that, the GPS devices definitely did not work as well as they do now. You had a lot of float and dither. The functionality wasn't there. The software wasn't as good as it is now. But just recently, in the last 10 years, GPS is leaps and bounds better. And the price has gotten down to a point where it's a little bit higher than house arrest, but it's so much better than house arrest, and it gives officers so much more information that has really cannibalized the RF market. The third segment I'm going to talk about is the breath alcohol market or segment. There's roughly 45,000 clients that are being monitored in the breath alcohol market in the United States. This is a growing segment as well. It's leaps and bounds better than it used to be. Back in the day, they had breath alcohol devices sitting at a client's home. They'd do 3 or 4 tests while they're at home, and it would be transmitted through a landline. Nowadays, it's small little breathalyzers with a cellular chip. They can carry around anywhere they go discreetly. It goes off, they take the test, it gives a GPS point when the person is taking the test, and it could be taken anywhere, any place, and it's actually, because of this, it's starting to grow, become a growing market in the United States. The fourth segment I'm going to talk about is the GPS, which is by far the fastest growing and largest segment in the United States. Roughly 200,000 clients are on GPS daily. This does not include the ICE contract, which is the immigration contract. The 200,000 clients that are on GPS daily are probation, parole, community corrections, pretrial, county, state level. And then you've got the ICE contract, which is the immigration federal contract, which roughly has 250,000 clients on that on GPS. So that gives you a total of 450,000 people on GPS. The different uses for GPS is another reason why it is the fastest growing segment, because it can be used on all different types of offenses. The largest offense outside of the immigration contract is sex offenders. There was legislation that was passed in Florida called Jessica Lunsford Law, and it's sex offender legislation. Almost all the states in the United States, not all of them, have some type of sex offender legislation that makes it mandatory for a sex offender to wear a GPS device. In a lot of cases, they have to wear a GPS device for life. So that is a big segment in the GPS marketplace. Domestic violence is a growing segment in GPS. There's known technology that, most of the GPS companies, if not all of them, have this, where they track the offender and then the victim has a device as well. What makes this technology good is, back in the day, they didn't have this technology, so you'd have a lot of these domestic violence clients showing up their girlfriend's house and creating a disturbance. Now they can put a GPS device on a domestic violence client, give the victim another device. If that domestic violence client gets within a certain distance of that person, an alert is generated to an officer, an alert is generated to that victim, so that victim knows that the domestic violence offender is in the area. So it does, it doesn't stop, all domestic violence, but it is a great notification, and it does notify the officer. So we're starting to see a lot of domestic violence legislation as well. The third one is gang disturbance. Through most urban areas, you're seeing a lot of gang violence, and it's increased, especially in the urban areas. Drug trafficking, drug violence, and gang wars are common. When utilizing inclusion and exclusion zones with gang members on GPS can limit these crimes. Obviously, none of this technology can stop these crimes, but it does give an indication to the officers when they put an inclusion zone around a certain gang zone, exclusion zone. It does give them notification, so they do have the ability to stop some crimes before they happen, or if a crime does happen, they can obviously identify whoever was on the GPS. So that it's being used a lot on gang members as well. And the last segment that GPS is really being used about, and it's really kind of in conjunction with a lot of this, is the jail and prison overpopulation. 15 to 20 years ago, it was lock 'em up mentality. Jails and prisons became overpopulated. It cost a government agency more and more to house somebody in a jail or prison cell. And so the U.S. started to release nonviolent offenders on GPS, which alleviated some of the overpopulated jails, but also saved agencies and taxpayers a lot of money. So that's another growing segment, but it's kind of in conjunction with the other segments. There's also been some significant advancements in GPS technology. You're seeing not only GPS getting better, smaller, battery life is getting better, where the client doesn't have to charge the device as much. But now you're getting Wi-Fi tracking, Wi-Fi communication with GPS. And as the European Union's Galileo system and the Russian GLONASS systems are online, chip manufacturers have developed chipsets that will take advantage of these better satellite systems, so you're getting a more accurate GPS point. And the cellular companies, when the GPS first came out, weren't overly great, and the cellular coverage now in the United States is getting better and better and better. And these GPS devices, not only if GPS goes out, it's got cellular triangulation, and you're having less and less connectivity issues because the cell coverage is that much better. And then the last segment I'm going to talk about is the continuous alcohol monitoring segment, which is roughly 30,000 clients active daily. In 2003, Scram Systems launched their Scram continuous alcohol monitoring device, and this kind of revolutionized the alcohol monitoring industry. It did so because the breath alcohol devices in 2003 were the ones that sat at the home, and you can only take the test at the home. What this device did is it was a breathalyzer around the ankle. It had a Draeger fuel cell, a strap, and a proximity tamper. And what it basically did, it had a pump, and it took your perspiration and it ran it across the fuel cell every 30 minutes. So it was taking a test continuously every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day. What this did was it allowed officers to really realize if somebody's really compliant or not, whereas in a breathalyzer, if somebody just doesn't take the test or they leave the device somewhere, an officer is not exactly 100% certain if that person was drinking or not drinking, or if somebody was sleeping and the device goes off. But with the Scram device, it goes off, it tests every 30 minutes. About 80 years ago, they did a test, and they've done a multiple where they tested alcohol in the blood, the urine, breath, and perspiration. And the studies have shown that all these different testing methods are very, very similar in the amount of alcohol they excrete in each system. They're not perfect. So that's why breath started off first. It's the least invasive. It was the easiest solution to get a breathalyzer and do it with a fuel cell. Urine and blood are very invasive, obviously, accurate but very invasive. And then when Scram came out with the perspiration, the 24/7, that was the most innovative technology that came out to that date. Now what has occurred is you can put a scram device on a medium or high risk client, and along with treatment, if it allows them to stay sober, all the evidence-based practices will tell you the longer a person can stay away from drugs or alcohol, the better chance they can stay sober the rest of their life. And scram is one of those pieces of equipment that fits into that continuum of evidence-based practices. If somebody does drink on a scram device, you'll know you can't drink around it. It has a proximity tamper. You can't slide anything through it, and you can't, if you cut the bracelet, you get a strap tamper. So it really allows the officers to really supervise those high and medium risk alcohol offenders and really hold them accountable. And so when a person does drink on a scram device, officers can then say, we need to increase their treatment, or we need to get them more help. And then people that can stay on a scram device that don't drink for a long period of time, they have a better chance, along with treatment, to stay sober the rest of their life. So that's kind of a quick summary of the U.S. marketplace. It's a growing marketplace. It's growing between 8 and 11%, depending on different statistics. And we're seeing it grow and grow and grow more and more and more. And, but, as I stated, that was a summary of it. And thank you very much for your time.
Dziękujemy bardzo za przygotowanie tak interesującego wystąpienia. Chciałam tylko przypomnieć, że czas na pytania, na dyskusję będzie tuż przed przerwą kawową, a teraz poproszę o przygotowanie się do wystąpienia pana Joe Weston i pana Amita Sethiego, którzy opowiedzą nam o transdermalnym systemie stężenia alkoholu, również o specyfice działania i jak to wygląda z perspektywy firmy w Wielkiej Brytanii. Pan Amit Sethi jest dyrektorem do spraw operacyjnych w Europie firmy Scrum. Posiada ponad 20-letnie doświadczenie w systemie sprawiedliwości, również w sektorze probacji. 6 lat uczestniczył w zarządzaniu prokuraturą. Od 2014 roku pracował w biurze burmistrza do spraw probacji i przestępczości w Londynie, gdzie przez 3 lata kierował wdrażaniem programu pilotażowego obowiązkowej trzeźwości w Londynie. Od 2017 roku dołączył do firmy Scrum. Z kolei pan Joe Weston ma 14-letnie doświadczenie w systemie dozoru elektronicznego, czyli Electronic Monitoring w Wielkiej Brytanii. Również jego droga zawodowa zaczęła się od sektoru sprowadzania usług dla brytyjskiego systemu w zakresie SDE. Był adwokatem w sytuacjach naruszenia systemu SDE. Badał rynki technologii, innowacje w branży i dzięki temu rozpoczął współpracę z firmą Scrum. Kierował również częścią operacyjną do spraw wdrażania pilotażu w Wielkiej Brytanii. Od 2017 roku pracuje dla firmy Scrum i przede wszystkim na co dzień zajmuje się wspieraniem rozwoju programów monitorowania alkoholu w Wielkiej Brytanii i Europie. Zapraszam.
Good morning, everyone. As Maya very kindly said, I'm Amit Sethi. This is Joe Weston. We both work for a company called Scrum Systems. That's fine. Thank you for having us today. Really appreciate being here. And we're looking forward to presenting the transdermal alcohol monitoring device, which I'll get in a moment. It's this device here that's been used both in the studies in Poland, but also in the Netherlands, in the UK as well. Presentation. Oh, perfect. So we can move to the next slide. Oh, perfect. So we're going to play a video, but actually we're just going to talk through it at this stage. Essentially, Scram Systems, as John said, started in 2003. And the reason it started was the founders were initially a gentleman called Mike Imes and Jeff Hawthorne. And essentially, they both had tragic events in their past that led them to founding the company. Jeff's best friend passed away due to a road traffic accident where the person was intoxicated, and he thought something can and should be done to be able to monitor people that are committing alcohol-related crimes. Mike's grandfather was dependent on the use of alcohol, and when he got intoxicated, he got violent. And so after an event between Mike's father and his grandfather, essentially he decided to invest in the company because he thought it'd be a good idea with Jeff, and that's how the company was formed. A lot of our members of the team working at Scram are ex-probation, ex-police, and they've come from those different regions and work for the company now, which is really interesting for us. So essentially, the device, in very simple terms, and Joe will go into this in detail in a moment, is essentially a breathalyzer for the ankle. So the way in which our bodies work is when we consume alcohol, a very small percentage is released from the skin. The device will take a test every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day. And when it takes that test, essentially taking the test, trying to detect the presence of alcohol that's released through your skin. And that's pretty much what it does in a nutshell. And because it's doing it 24 hours a day, that will mean that unlike point-in-time testing like a breathalyzer or even blood, unlike point-in-time testing, it will mean that you're able to see the whole drinking event and not just a part of it. So you can see when they started, when they finished, and you'll see some of that on the screen, hopefully in a little while. Yep. So I'm going to hand you over to Joe now. Sorry.
So Amit's gave you an overview of how the alcohol monitoring system works. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the alcohol and how the body processes the alcohol that we consume. So when we take a drink, approximately 95% of the alcohol that we consume is processed through our liver and leaves in our urine or through our breath. A very small percentage of the alcohol that we consume, approximately 1%, actually leaves through our sweat. And the transdermal device, which is worn on the ankle, is actually sampling that 1% that leaves through our skin. So the transdermal device is fitted to the ankle securely. As John mentioned in his presentation, there are a host of technologies built into the device that ensures it's not being tampered with. The data is stored within the tag, so the reading's taken continuously every 30 minutes, and it's a controlled sample. That information is stored within the bracelet, and it's uploaded to Scram Systems via the base station, which is normally at the wearer's home address. That information is sent to Scram Systems, where we have a team of highly trained data analysts that review the information from the device itself. They then apply a strict confirmation criteria to that analysis, and as such we can confirm whether someone has consumed alcohol or not. As part of that process, we can also tell the difference between consumed alcohol, so somebody taking a drink, and an environmental source of alcohol, hand sanitizer, for example. We are able to tell the difference through our confirmation process without any secondary tests being required. The battery life on the devices is approximately 90 days, so this can be worn continuously for 90 days with no intervention from the person wearing the device. So they don't need to charge the device, they simply need to have this on their ankle and not consume alcohol. The straps themselves are hypoallergenic, so they won't cause any reactions being worn on the skin, and there's some memory within the device itself, so we can store up to 30 days worth of continuous monitoring information before we can upload that. In reality, we can actually store a lot more than that, but we support up to 30 days worth of information stored on this device without it being uploaded to us. So this is just a quick recap. So we mentioned the tag is worn on the ankle. It takes the readings continuously every 30 minutes, and then it's uploaded. Thanks, Amit. Uploaded generally once a day via this device. And in essence, this device has a SIM card. It can be connected to Wi-Fi, and this is what sends the information to us. So we analyse the information and report back retrospectively. So generally, within 24 hours, we would have reported back to the authority whether somebody has had an alcohol event or not. And that is reported by our software called ScramNet, as you'll see on the screen. And we can also report that as a daily action plan, so we can send a note to the relevant authorities on a daily basis to confirm whether there's any action needs taken if anyone's drinking or not. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the product itself and some of the core functions of the device. We're going to keep it at a fairly high level, but we thought it might be interesting to show you how the tag is working and some of the features and functions of the tag. So this is an example of a graph that we pull from our system. The first line you'll see there is the blue infrared sensor. This is what we use to detect whether anything has been placed between the device and the ankle. So if anyone is trying to get around, block the readings. The way in which this works at a very high level is it shines a beam of light from the device to the ankle and then measures how much of that light is reflected back from the person's leg. It then stores that information within the bracelet itself, and then anything that's placed between the tag and the ankle will shine back a different level of light, so we know that something has been placed between the tag and the ankle. That's at a very high level. The next is a temperature sensor. So there's a sensor in the device that we can see here. It's not straight. So it's up and down with usual activity. So if people are going about their daily activity, we would expect the temperature to go up and down. If that tag was removed, we would see a very different temperature sensor. It would be very stable and it would be at room temperature generally. So this just allows us to be sure that the bracelet is fitted correctly and it's being worn by a person going about their daily activities. And last but not least, we have the black line. So this is alcohol. We measure alcohol as transdermal alcohol concentration. This is a term that didn't exist until we invented this technology. So we coined the term. And we can see here, the alcohol is being absorbed into the body when somebody has a drink. And I believe this was my colleague Amit's drinking event. We then see the alcohol reach a level, so a peak. So we're able to report back to the authorities how much the person had to drink. And then we look at how quickly the alcohol is being processed by the body. And that's a very quick snapshot of how we can tell the difference between consumed alcohol and environmental alcohol.
So just to, do you want to go back?
Let's go back.
So just to give you a little bit of a sense of what I did on this event here. It was evening time. I drank about this much rum. And I don't drink very often. So when I was drinking this, I drank it really quickly, held my nose and just downed it because I was doing testing. And essentially what happened was I hit the drink drive limit very, very quickly. So 0.055 on the left-hand side in TAC, transdermal alcohol concentration, is equivalent to approximately the drink drive limit in the UK. So that's about 0.35 in breath, 0.8 in blood. And the other things that the technology can do is that if someone is not moving or they've passed out and passed away potentially, we can detect that from what we're seeing over here. And as Joe said, if someone did try and cut the bracelet off or trying to put something between the tag and the ankle, that blue line's going to jump up and down, and we're able to detect that. If they tried to cut the bracelet off, both the temperature and the blue line would drop suddenly. So generally what we see is as people's day-to-day activity goes on. So they get under the covers when they're sleeping, the temperature rises. When they're out and about, the temperature falls. But it falls in accordance with the body temperature as opposed to the environment so much.
I've just got one more point, one more key point to leave you with before I hand over to Amit to discuss our operations worldwide. And that is that the key benefit I feel to this SCRAM technology is that we are able to show the authorities the entirety of the drinking event. So with a breathalyzer, it's a point in time. So you take the test and it gives you a point in time how much alcohol is in the system at that moment. With the CAM device, it shows you the entirety of the drinking event. So it shows you when they started drinking, it shows you what level that drink got to, and then when they were completely sober. You can look at periods of time over weeks, months, days, or individual drinking events, and it's key to show the drinking behaviour of the people wearing the devices. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Amit. I'll flip the slides for you.
So you've heard from John and Joe already a little bit about what we do and how it works. I'm going to talk more about where we do it now. So, do you want to flip it? Next. So obviously we've said that we operate. You can go really fast through that. Yeah. Yeah. So we operate in primarily within the US, Canada, the UK, the Netherlands. And obviously we run a pilot in Poland, and we're very excited about what we're doing in Poland at the moment. Australia and New Zealand are other areas in which we operate as well. And Dan, my counterpart in New Zealand and Australia, will be talking to you later on today about what we do down there. There is interest from places like South Africa as well, because my understanding is their prison population and their population outside of prison, they have high issues with alcohol, like other places in the world, I guess. To date, we've conducted more than 900,000 tests, well, monitored clients, and actually we hit 100 million tests last week, actually. We've conducted 4.2 billion tests per person as well, and our sober day rate, which is kind of the key figure here, is over 97% globally. What our sober day rate is, it can be aligned with compliance. But it's not compliance of an individual, it's compliance of the entire cohort. So if we have 100 people going through testing for a month, you're going to have a number of tests taken per month. And off that, if someone tampers with it, or tries to remove the tag, or drinks alcohol, that's taken off that sober day rate. And what we find is off our cohorts, and our cohorts consist of family law clients, criminal justice clients, etc., of our cohorts, 97% of the time, they are sober while wearing the tag. And that's kind of key for us. So I'm not going to talk about the US or Canada. John's probably talked that to death already. So I'll move on to the Netherlands and the United Kingdom and Poland. Should I touch on this?
I can touch on that.
After you.
So yeah, I'll just touch on our family law cohort because I deal with them on a daily basis. So we obviously work in the criminal justice sector with prisons, police, courts, but we also work in the family law sector. And this can be voluntary and it can also be court ordered, and it's generally used in child custody cases. And unlike criminal justice, it's not always sobriety we're looking for. It can be used to evidence drinking behaviours, specifically that people aren't drinking when they have custody of their children. But the family law sector is a growing market. Originally, this was designed for criminal justice due to the size and the abilities of this device, but it transfers very well to the family law sector. And we're currently, in the UK, assisting family law courts to evidence drinking behaviours using this device. Thanks.
So touching on family law very quickly and taking that a bit further, what we found is that kind of aligns to what you've been doing in Poland in terms of the prison market. And the reason I say that is because within the family law sector, it may be that a father or a mother wants to gain access to their children. and they only need to be monitored for the weekend. So what the person will do is wear the tag while you need them to wear it, essentially. So they'll keep the tag on, but the monitoring will primarily take place when you need it to take place. So if it's on a weekend, or alternatively it's when they're relieving prison, for example, to go to work, you can monitor them during that space of time. So they may be able to drink at other times, but not when the children are with them. Similarly, if someone's leaving prison to go to work and you don't want them to drink when they're at work, if they've got the tag on, we can tell if they've been drinking when they're outside of the prison itself. The Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime is formerly where Boris Johnson was Mayor of London before he became Prime Minister. And essentially, when he was Mayor of London, he initiated this program where people were being monitored in a very small part of London. And they will be monitored in accordance with the criminal justice sector under a requirement called the alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement. And essentially what that was that someone went to commit an offence like assault, criminal damage, drink driving, things of that nature, and they came before the court, they were convicted of that offence, and after being convicted of that offence, the court essentially mandated them to be abstinent from alcohol for up to 120 days. And they were using this device to test whether the person would be compliant or not. Once again, compliance rates were extremely high. I was responsible for implementation of that pilot initially, and that started in a very small part of London. That was then expanded to all of London. And it kind of seemed like the never-ending pilot, if I'm honest with you. It was supposed to be a year, it became 2 years, it became 3, and it ended after 4 years. And that was a change of administration as well at the Mayor's Office. So we saw the Mayor of London change, and they continued the pilot for another year and a half, I think it is. Then the Ministry of Justice picked up a new pilot, and that was in Humberside, Lincolnshire and North Yorkshire, slightly further north of the country in the United Kingdom, or in England. And again, they implemented a new alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement. So it's the same requirement as they did in London, just with a new cohort of offender. Both of those requirements saw over 1,500 clients go through the programs combined, saw actual compliance rates. I'm not talking about the sober day rate, I'm talking about those people that failed to comply, were returned to court and convicted of failing to comply at 94%. I was a senior probation prosecutor in London, and I did that job for about 9 years, and I've never seen compliance rates that high, personally. So it was very impressive, the requirement, the effect that was coming out when on tag. And sober day rates, again, were above 97%. The Ministry of Justice then, in the United Kingdom, then implemented a new pilot with prisons. It's a very small pilot, and it allowed them to test the use of alcohol monitoring via the bracelet on prison leavers. So as they're leaving prison, they're reintegrating into society. This was to help them reintegrate. So it's to monitor their alcohol consumption. And then the probation officer could have a conversation with them if you do find they're drinking very often, if you find they're drinking at specific times of the week. It gives valuable information to the officers so that it can be addressed with them. That doesn't mean someone's going to be returned to prison if they drink, but ultimately, if they're drinking and then committing another offence, potentially you are going to be returned to prison. And then we move towards a national rollout. So in England and Wales, national rollout started in 2020. So we endorsed a contract with the Ministry of Justice in May 2020. And essentially, that was for the alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement. So the same pilot that had been previously conducted. And essentially what happened was we started that program, it was no longer a pilot, in Wales first in October 2020, and then it moved across England in March 2021. So they were doing it in two parts of the United Kingdom. So Wales first and then England. Then they moved to the alcohol monitoring on license program. So prison leavers, licenses when someone's leaving prison and you get a license to leave prison. So they imposed it on licenses where someone leaves a prison and they're required not to consume alcohol again, and they're monitored by the tag. Now, the alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement can go up to 120 days. That's the limit in accordance with legislation. That being said, on license, it can be a lot shorter or a lot longer, depending on what the license requires. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger over there, but I won't talk about the numbers. I'll leave the Ministry of Justice, who are talking later on, to talk about the numbers over there. Again, I've just covered this already, but the legislation, as I said before, the alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement is a part of the LASPO legislation, and it can be imposed for up to 120 days. It can be imposed in accordance with suspended sentence orders and community orders. Both are community-based disposals that courts can impose. And that went live in England in October, and in March, England and Wales, respectively. I apologize. AML, alcohol monitoring on license, is a complete ban, but we also split that. So it can be a complete ban for some people, and it can be monitoring only for others. And it really is meant to help people reintegrate into society. And it gives the probation officer valuable information and allows them to look into what the client is actually doing and address it accordingly. I won't go through all of these quotes, but essentially, due to the fact that these two launches of programs across England and Wales have attracted a lot of media attention, we've had quotes from the Deputy Prime Minister, or former Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Kit Malthouse, and also offenders. And actually, from my perspective, the offenders quote is the most interesting for me. And the reason I say that, there's a person called Dave. That's not his real name. He was subject to monitoring via the tag itself. And he was subject to monitoring on a community-based order, so a court disposal. And what he said was, I firmly believe that if it wasn't for the tag and for the support of the probation, that probation gave me, that I'd either be dead or in prison. That's kind of really nice for us to see, in that it not only endorses the product, but more importantly, it shows that the collaboration between the tag, which is a tool, that's all this is. It's a tool to enable, it's gone dead. It's a tool to enable information to be passed to the probation officer and for them to act accordingly. Oh, it's back again. Hello? Yeah, there you go. The other one was Arthur, who had been sober for, being sober for 6 months has helped me keep my emotions in check and think clearly, I think he was trying to say. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It's nice to see that feedback directly from offenders. Now, is it going to work for everyone? No. That's quite obvious by virtue of the fact that we do have breaches occurring, and some people continually breach. But the fact that we're seeing these kinds of quotes overwhelmingly come from offenders is key to us, because it's showing that change of behavior, which is what we want to see. I won't go into the Netherlands too much, simply because our colleagues in the Netherlands are going to talk directly to you. But in short, there was a pilot that was conducted in the Netherlands between 2017 and 2019, and they found that 64% of the subjects wearing the alcohol tag reported that they did not drink for a further 3 months after coming off the tag. And what that is it's very important for us to see, because it shows, at least in the short term, that people are changing their behavior in terms of their relationship with alcohol. As I said, I won't go too much into that, because I'm sure Anna will talk to that in more depth than I can. But what was key there was that the Ministry of Justice announced that they were going to have a national rollout over there of ScramCam technology in 2020. I believe that legislation is still being changed at this time. It can take longer than we would like, perhaps, but it is in play at the moment. And obviously in Poland, we had a pilot conducted over here. And the primary aim of the project was to obtain knowledge on the possibility of using transdermal alcohol monitoring for inmates released from the penitentiary. What we found was that 66 offenders, went through the program, for 60 days each. And we found that overall compliance rates were at an 89%, and the sober day rates, which is key, was at 95%. Again, extremely high, and we're excited to see what's coming next from Poland now. I think a few closing thoughts. Yeah. The way I'd close is that there's no silver bullet for stopping someone from consuming alcohol or changing their behavior. I've worked in probation, I've worked in the EM side. It's a complicated relationship between alcohol and reoffending. But if we can help change that with the tool and the intervention of the authority, that's always a good thing. That's how we would see things moving forward. So what this does, it allows prisons, probation, judges, magistrates with an extra tool to address and directly address a core element in offending behavior. So you remove the alcohol, potentially that offending behavior can be significantly impacted. Now, I'd never stand here, and you heard John talk about domestic violence earlier on, I'd never stand here for a second and say alcohol is the root cause of domestic violence. It's not. But what we do find, it is a strongly influencing factor at times. And when you remove the alcohol, it can reduce the risk. It doesn't remove it entirely, but it can reduce the risk. And so we are finding more and more people are being put on these requirements that are domestic violence offenders. It allows the client to continue to be a constructive member of society whilst monitoring their activity. So, for example, if someone's relieving prison, they can go out, they can do the work, they can start to reintegrate into society under a slower pace, come back to prison, for example, and still wear the tag and still be monitored and allow the authority to have that information that is very valuable to see how they've been doing when they're out and about. It also allows for better financial planning, and obviously there's health benefits when people are abstinent from alcohol. And perhaps it provides a teachable moment as well. So if you know someone's drinking on a Friday, Saturday, or they drink extremely high rates suddenly out of nowhere, you can then have that conversation with them and say, well, why did you do that? We actually had a client, and it was a while ago now, but they were completely abstinent, and suddenly they drank. They shouldn't have been on their feet, essentially. They drank so much. They should have been in hospital. And it allowed the officer to say, well, what happened there? And it turned out, actually, they were abused. And they were trying to forget about what happened. So they started consuming a lot of alcohol. But it helped them to address it. If the officer hadn't known about that drinking event, they wouldn't have been able to address what could have been a very difficult situation for the person. I thank you for your time today. I'm happy to answer questions later on. And I appreciate being here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Bardzo dziękujemy za przedstawienie tak szerokiej perspektywy zastosowania i możliwości działania systemu transnormalnego monitorowania alkoholu. W tej chwili będziemy łączyli się z Australią, z panem Danem Altwaterem, który również jest dyrektorem operacyjnym firmy Scrum na ten region. I jak pan Amit Sethi powtarza, jest również osobą najbardziej doświadczoną, jeżeli chodzi o tą technologię i zarządzanie tą technologią, wdrażanie i rozprzestrzenianie idei transnormalnego monitorowania alkoholu. Musimy poczekać jeszcze 2 minuty na połączenie z naszym gościem.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Hello?
Hello. Oh, there we go.
Please
Hi,
start.
everybody. My name is Dan Albader. I'm with Scram Systems as well. I've been with Scram Systems for 12 years now. Moved over to New Zealand with my family about 5 years ago in an effort to get New Zealand and Australia off the ground. Both countries are a little bit slow in terms of picking up technology, so we thought a resource over here would help the cause. What I want to speak to you guys about today is just the different use cases for Scram based on all the different possible cohorts that it would be applicable to. I heard work release mentioned. That is a very popular Scram program in the States. Family court, probation. I'm going to speak to specifically what we're doing in Australia and New Zealand. We have something over here called treatment courts or drug courts. Worldwide, there's over 3,000 drug courts, with the vast majority of those being in the United States. These treatment courts are diversion courts. So typically a client will have a suspended sentence if they are able to successfully complete what is typically an 18-month program. So these treatment courts are specialized in working with clients that have drug and alcohol dependencies. There's domestic violence tracks for treatment courts. Essentially what they are is just specialized teams to provide wraparound services to each client. So probation, defense, the judge, case managers, treatment, they're all invested in a client's sobriety. So in Queensland runs a drug court out of Brisbane, and all participants that enter the drug court are placed on Scram. And this includes participants that have no alcohol present in their assessments. So drug-dependent clients are still placed on Scram upon entry into the program. And the reason why Scram is used on drug-dependent clients is that the data shows that the majority of the time they relapse onto drugs, they're going to relapse onto alcohol first. So in treatment courts, the device is used really as an assessment tool. The judges and the team realize that relapse is part of recovery. Prior to the clients being in the court every week, they review the previous week's Scram data for any alcohol alerts. And then they give that client the opportunity to admit to a drinking event. So the client, or the judge essentially uses Scram as an assessment tool in looking for clients that are invested in their sobriety. So if a client did drink, what the judge is looking for is an admission. If they get an admission, they more than likely have somebody that's going to be easier to work with. So this is one example of a Scram program where treatment is a major component. Compliance rates are typically a little bit lower in this type of setting. Queensland roughly has about a 70% compliance rate. That is people going through the program without any drinking events or any tampers whatsoever, just all sobriety. And the opposite to a treatment court approach would be our program with Corrections Victoria. They started using Scram in 2011. We've been through 3 contract renewals with them, and we would consider them a flagship partner of ours. This program is all parolees. Every single client on Scram is sanctioned directly by the parole board as a condition of release. So unlike a treatment court model, this model is extremely punitive. So there are no second chances under this. If you have a positive drinking event or a positive tamper, that's going to equal a parole violation and revocation. So due to heavy sanctions, you see a compliance rate that's extremely high. You're talking about rare incidences when we actually have a confirmed tamper event. Of note is that Corrections Victoria does all their installations in the field. So Joe and Amit did a good job of explaining the technology, but one thing to keep in mind is that we do support multiple delivery models. So whether that be an installation in the jail or an installation in the field, it can be done either way, thanks to the cellular base station. In New Zealand, we also work very closely with the drug courts. We're very proud of that. It's a labor of love. As Ahmed mentioned, we kind of have a never-ending pilot over here with New Zealand Corrections. We finished a 4-year successful trial. The way that New Zealand Corrections used it is originally when we moved over here, the law did not support alcohol testing. Prior to 5 years ago, it was against the law for probation to actually monitor clients for alcohol consumption. So before our trial began, it actually started with some legislative efforts to change that. So since this trial began, we've had about 107 participants. It's a relatively small trial. It's in the northern region of New Zealand, and it's run by probation. So the chief probation officer is the key contact that administers the program. And I would say 95% of the clients were drunk or inebriated at the time of arrest. And again, a very punitive program, which speaks to that high compliance rate. So, I don't know, the one thing I'd like to leave you guys with is just to think about different uses for Scram within your country. It's kind of a product that works for everybody. It's something that works for the treatment side of the aisle because it provides information and data, and it's used as a tool to assess sobriety. And it's also functional as more of a deterrent to sobriety for high risk and high risk clients, essentially. In New Zealand and Australia, we also have many solicitors that use Scram to show sobriety with their clients during adjudication in Bailey circumstances. So if a client has an 18-month, the courts over here are really backed up. If a client has, 6 months before they're actually going to go to trial, it is pretty common for a judge to sanction Scram from the bench for that client to prove sobriety. And the solicitors like it because it shows the courts that they have a compliant client and can maybe use to kind of angle sentencing reductions. Yeah, I would just encourage you guys to get creative. Alcohol dependency is the low-hanging recidivism, and the agencies that figure that out can have a profound effect on rearrest rates. That's it. It's 9:39, and I want to go to bed over here.
Thank you.
Guys for the opportunity to talk today.
Thank you so much, Dan, for your lecture. It was really interesting to hear something about Australia and New Zealand and how a transdermal monitoring system works there. Dziękujemy bardzo panu Danowi Alvaterowi za omówienie i przedstawienie systemu TMSA w Australii i w Nowej Zelandii. Po tych kilku niezmiernie ciekawych wystąpieniach zachęcam do rozpoczęcia dyskusji. Kto miałby pytania z osób obecnych na sali, jak również z osób, które łączą się z nami internetowo. Teraz jest ten czas, aby pytać, dowiadywać się.
Halo. Dzień dobry. Ja mam takie pytanie dotyczące tej praktyki stosowania tego w jednostkach penitencjarnych polskich. Ja wiem, że pani profesor będzie to uszczegóławiać, ale jeśli dobrze usłyszałem, to było to stosowane w populacji tam ponad 60 osób, 66 osób, tak? Przez 60 dni, czyli w jakich to okolicznościach się odbywało? To tak pokrótce, bo tak mnie to właśnie zastanawia. Jakie to były realia tego stosowania?
Szanowni, działa, tak? Szanowni Państwo, Panie Pułkowniku, tutaj trzeba by było może sięgnąć do historii w ogóle zainteresowania naszego tą problematyką. Otóż w 2020 roku pracownicy, pod moim kierunkiem pracownicy jeszcze dawnego Instytutu Badawczo-Rozwojowego pokusili się o przegląd literatury, ale też i aktów prawnych, które dotyczą właśnie stosowania tej technologii w innych krajach. Oczywiście na użytek Polski wymyśliliśmy tą nazwę TMSA, czyli Transdermalny Monitoring Stężenia Alkoholu, po to, żebyśmy się mogli łatwiej komunikować z opinią społeczną, z decydentami i między sobą również. I w 2021 roku otrzymaliśmy finansowanie z Ministerstwa Sprawiedliwości na realizację tego projektu, o którym dzisiaj będziemy za chwilę rozmawiać. W pierwotnym założeniu mieliśmy po pierwsze przeprowadzić badania właśnie takie monitorujące 60-dniowe. Dlaczego tylko 60-dniowe i dlaczego akurat w październiku, listopadzie, to powiem krótko. Pandemia, która rzeczywiście nam te pierwotne nasze założenia dość ambitne sparaliżowała i musieliśmy po prostu pójść na pewne ustępstwa, czyli zredukować te nasze działania, bo najpierw chcieliśmy przebadać nie tylko tych więźniów, którzy wychodzą bez konwojenta na zatrudnienie zewnętrzne, ale także właśnie przebywających albo na warunkowym zwolnieniu, albo tych, którzy wychodzą na przepustki. I takie było pierwotne założenie w czerwcu. Później niestety już musieliśmy się poddać tym ograniczeniom, dlatego też zdecydowaliśmy się tylko na tych właśnie zewnętrznie pracujących bez konwojenta. Oczywiście tutaj chciałabym bardzo mocno podkreślić fantastyczną współpracę z Centralnym Zarządem Służby Więziennej. Bardzo chciałabym już zresztą na wstępie, jak otwierałam konferencję, podkreślić tą współpracę koordynatorów wyznaczonych przez CZ. Otrzymaliśmy od nich statystyki i na bazie statystyk wyłoniliśmy teren do badania, czyli właśnie Dolnośląski Okręg, i tam przeprowadziliśmy badania w zakładach karnych. I to była, dlatego mówiliśmy, dlatego myślę, że na to pytanie panu odpowiedziałam, bo pytanie dotyczyło, jakie okoliczności sprawiły, że było te 60 osób i 60 dni. Jeżeli chodzi o te 60 osób, to może jeszcze tylko dodam, że ograniczenia finansowe nas też tutaj mocno trzymały, bo finansowanie było dość duże, ale jednak musieliśmy się dostosować do reżimu finansowego, do harmonogramu, do wielu zaplanowanych dalej działań. Dopowiem tylko, że dzisiejsza konferencja nie jest podsumowującą, dlatego że my jeszcze realizujemy projekt do maja 2023 roku. Teraz trwają już koncepcyjne prace nad opracowaniem standardów penitencjarnych. Za chwilę ruszamy z pracami dotyczącymi analizy aktów prawnych i możliwości ich zmiany, nowelizacji pod kątem właśnie wprowadzenia tej technologii, nie tylko w przestrzeni penitencjarnej, ale także właśnie szerzej troszeczkę w przestrzeni probacyjnej. Zobaczymy, czy jest to możliwe w tych warunkach naszych społeczno-prawnych polskich. A to, co najważniejsze, to to, że zaczęliśmy od najbardziej chyba wrażliwego miejsca, jakim jest zakład karny, i tutaj chcemy też wspomóc poprzez prowadzenie skramu również terapię tych więźniów, którzy są uzależnieni od alkoholu, i myślę, że to potem przekładać się będzie na dalsze ich życie i nie tylko życie ich, ale też ich rodzin, czyli całego społeczeństwa. Czyli w tym momencie tak jakby taką kopułą ochronną otaczamy wiele środowisk, do których no, oni przecież kiedyś wrócą po zakończeniu kary izolacji więziennej. To chyba tyle, chyba że jeszcze pan pułkownik chciałby coś wiedzieć, to bardzo proszę.
Oczywiście pytań mi się rodzi wiele, biorąc pod uwagę znajomość tej praktyki penitencjarnej, ale nie chciałbym ani zdominować dyskusji, ani w tym momencie jakby skupić się tylko na tym wątku, który mnie interesuje, także ja myślę, że później czy ja, czy dyrektor biura penitencjarnego jeszcze z panią profesor nawiąże dyskurs, także w tym momencie dziękuję.
Ja tylko jeszcze może dopowiem, że bardzo chętnie podejmę się wymiany zdań, bo też mamy wiele takich płaszczyzn, może inaczej, takich obszarów, które no, tylko panowie jesteście w stanie tą naszą ciekawość zaspokoić i myślę, że ta współpraca zaowocuje naprawdę dobrą realizacją, dobrym projektem. Oczywiście też powiem, że na końcu już, czyli w tym raporcie końcowym znajdzie się propozycja harmonogramu wdrożenia takiego rozwiązania. Pamiętajmy, że jest to tylko pilotaż, że jest to tylko i wyłącznie propozycja i to jest przygotowanie do wdrożenia. My nie aspirujemy do tego jako realizatorzy projektu, że już wdrażamy, prawda? Tu sprawa, dajemy, że tak powiem, wkład i pod refleksję i później pod decyzję. Myślę, że przynajmniej z tego naszego dotychczasowego działania wynika, że no, bardzo optymistycznie na to wszystko patrzymy. Dzisiaj będę Państwu relacjonowała zaledwie wycinek tych naszych wyników badań. Nie chcę wszystkiego też, bo nie mogę wszystkiego, że tak powiem, podawać do publicznej wiadomości, ale opowiem Państwu i na pewno myślę, że Państwo też ciekawe wnioski z tego wysnujecie odnośnie reakcji zarówno funkcjonariuszy, którzy brali w tym pilotażu udział, jak też i skazanych, bo, ale to może skończę, bo nie będę miała o czym mówić po lunchu. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dzień dobry Państwu, Sławomir Grzesiak. Ja mam takie pytanie do pana Amita Setiego i Johna Westona. Państwo przedstawialiście różne kraje, różnie trwały te okresy wdrożenia państwa technologii. Ja chciałbym zapytać panów o przyczyny tak różnych tych czasookresów. Z czego one wynikają? Czy to może z postępu związanych ze zmianami prawnymi w tych krajach? Czy to może z przyjęciem tej technologii? Czy może z urządzeniem jako takim i doskonaleniem jego technicznych właściwości? Dziękuję.
So can you hear me okay? I'm gonna start with the latter in terms of refining the device. Since about 2012-13, this has been the core product. So what's in front of you is what we've seen. There is developments being taken place in the background when it comes to firmware and small pieces of hardware within the device, and it has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller over the years. But I don't think that's the element that that allows for implementation to take place, because the device is the device. What it does is very good at what it does. It detects whether someone's been consuming alcohol or not. And as we heard before, we can differentiate between consumed and environmental. And that's been able to do that for a very, very long time. Or Scram systems have been able to do that for a very long time. In terms of why it takes so long within Europe specifically, is that they wanted to, they do test a device. We had to go through cost testing. So that's the Center of Approved Science and Technology, to ensure the Ministry of Justice and the powers that be were happy to use the device within the respective cohort. So that was number one. Then it went through pilot stages. And the pilot stages, we were expecting it to be a year. That became 4 years, which became 5 years. within 2 separate pilots in total. And that was a key element because that proved not only the technology, but more importantly, the impact it would have on the cohorts wearing the technology. And in my respectful opinion, I think that's what was taking so long. The authority wanted to satisfy themselves that if they do implement this technology, it's going to be a valuable tool for the authority to utilize. And then clearly, legislation takes a little while to change. So it's the stages that you go through in order to allow for legislation to change. Now in Poland, you've already conducted a small-scale pilot. The question that I would ask is, what's the next step? Do you need to expand the cohort? Are the results acceptable? Do we now need to look at a new pilot? Or alternatively, is the opinion that actually it's been operating in the States and having a good impact on reoffending rates for some time over there, since 2003. It's been operating in the UK since 2014. It's been operating in the Netherlands since 2017. Both Wales and England and the Netherlands have committed to a national rollout. What's the next step for Poland? Can you go straight to a program? In which case, do you need to look at legislation? Do you need to look at the operating model? And those are all things that I think that would take time and do take time in any region that you go to. Does that answer your question? Brilliant. Thank you.
Czy są jeszcze jakieś pytania tutaj spośród uczestników konferencji stacjonarnie czy zdalnie? Nie widzę, nie otrzymuję sygnałów. W takim razie zapraszam Państwa na 15-minutową przerwę kawową.